from an Azure perspective, we've looked at our research and looked at what is happening in the retail sector. And we're very happy to be joined by Joy Okumu. She's the head of retail at Tech Center, TBC, one of our amazing customers, and she's going to be sharing some insights as we go along in terms of what they see from a retail perspective in the customer experience space. It's important that, again, you understand how we do this process. So I'm just going to give a little quick snippet of how we do this process. We have over 250,000 panel members. And in this survey, which we do quarterly surveys. The last one we did was H2 2025. We ask, questions like, when was the last time you went to a retail store? Which retail store did you go to? And if we get over 1,000 responses around a certain brand, and then we get engagement over that 1,000, we then can add them to our report. So in some instances, you find that year to year, the changes, or quarter to quarter, sorry, the changes in who's leading and why they're leading will change, because we're not specifying we're not going to the same person over and over and over again throughout the year. We've got 250,000 panel members, and we're asking that across the group so that we can see a very wide and response. So what do we know about the markets in Africa? The biggest thing that comes out of the data that we have is there's a lot of consumers. We're about 1.3 billion in terms of population, but in terms of consumers and the consumers that spend, with over 800 million in that space. And what that tells us is that we as a market, African market, we have a lot of customers who are in the retail space, buying, selling, and it makes it a very innovative space, with a lot of those 66% being informal. But what that means is, we shouldn't be relying on gut feel, and this is where us as a duo really try and help you guys to understand not only the customer in real time, but to understand the customer across a period of time, right? And what that means is basically, how do we start surrounding the customer that shows up at that retail point with how do we take the customer and actually start giving you information across many different channels, right? So what are their basic profile? So is a female, the age group, where they live, the spending habits, what does that wallet share look like? What are their beliefs and pastimes? So that you can actually have a rich profile of that customer and actually be able to build solutions and products around that customer. And this is where we really thrive. Now, I just want to take a pause here, Joy, and maybe from a textbook center perspective, maybe you could tell us, what does your average consumer look like? What are your, who walks into a textbook center, and what are they looking for?
All right. So typically, we group based on the data we've gotten from our loyalty programs and what we track. We see about 60% of our consumers are female, 40% are male. Yeah. And these are so I ran stores running from premium outlets to express stores. So you
Mm-hmm.
find some aspects would be very particular to those branches, to different branches, but
Mm-hmm.
the underlying aspect is the same. So one, for premium stores, we see consumers who are very tech savvy, who are knowledgeable, who
Mm-hmm.
demand a certain level of experience. And then
Mm-hmm.
for the standard stores, you have the typical, you'd have one or two customers coming in demanding some very high level of experience. However, majority expect the basic, meet and greet, engagement, needs being
Mm-hmm.
met. Then
Mm-hmm.
we have the express, who, of course, just want to come in, quickly pick what they wanted, and exit the store in the shortest time possible. So we have a different mix depending on this on the on the branch you go to. But the underlying fact of all of these customers is they're looking for a fast and friendly experience whenever they come into the store.
So comparative, when we look at 2025 and 2024, and we're just going to look macro in the macro world, we've seen that the global average for retail sales is at 3.5%, and Kenya is not very far from that with 3.6, but it is falling behind in terms of the regional aspect of that. And I think there's many conversations that we can have about the macro trends and where where things are, and of course the political economy. But I think what stands out for me in this is that if you are in retail, you're what you're seeing from a sales perspective is tracking with a global scene, and that's very important. Means that what Joy just talked about, tech savvy consumers who are still walking into brick and mortar it's an amazing testimony to the peculiarity of the Kenyan context, but the fact that it's still growing means that people still are demanding service and they still want products to be delivered. But there's something to be said about, of course, our market and the different markets that are out there, and the key component there is if you see the growth in the number of retailers, the small retailers, it's really growing. So traditional retail is growing, right? What what that means is that possibly people are doing a lot of things online that are based off, let me go see, let me compare, let me get information, but they're still going back into the traditional retail, right? And where we're seeing the disruption from a Kenya perspective is just those exits. We've had a lot of large retailers that have exited Kenya, the ShopRites, the South African ones. There's been closures here and there, and I think that's where we're seeing that sluggish growth. But I would stand to say, and Joy, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, that people walking into traditional retail is still a big thing for us.
I think it still is. And if you look at probably the homegrown brands, here we'll talk about Naivas and Quickmart. The growth is exponential. I think Naivas is now on above 120 outlets, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Quickmart is above 65, last I checked. And even Carrefour, if you look at the expansion. So if you compare with the Southern African brands or West African brands that have come into the retail space in Kenya, I think the biggest challenge would be in terms of localizing their product, services, and communication to be able to connect to the Kenyan shopper. And I think that is what I could say has been the biggest issue, if I could benchmark on ShopRite, is offering how local or how recognizable is their communication on their product to the local the consumers. And if you look at even campaigns being run by Carrefour, you see how much they try to localize the experience as much as possible using examples that resonate with the market, as well as benchmarking on some of the best practices that they have in their parent companies. Look at the self-checkout, and I don't want to preempt this, but if you look at the self-checkout piloted by Carrefour, is speaking to the tech savviness and the discernment the customers have, but still trying to keep it as much as local as possible, so there's a faster adoption rather than looking at it as a strange aspect.
And I agree with that in terms of where we're seeing Carrefour win, but also the localization, and in our data, the growth in stores is in the local or the Kenyan-born retail stores, your Naivas, your Quick Mart, as you said, and they're going into spaces where you won't find a Carrefour, right? And this is important. Even when we look at our NPS data, regional players are doing better in certain regions versus the larger national retailers. The lazy thing to say is, retail is going down because people are going to e-commerce. Yes, there's an e-commerce expansion, but I think that, when we look at the growth and the expansion from a physical retail store, and what we're seeing that Kenya is matching the global trend in terms of traditional retail, it tells us that there's still room to grow. So if you're in traditional retail, please push back on e-commerce is expanding. I think the two can live together. The volatility of consumer spending, of course, as I said, the political economy is far-reaching. We have no control over the Trump Iran situation, which is obviously then going into the supply chain disruptions that we've seen. But all of this tells us that, at the end of the day, when we look at these three components, yes, of course, they're affecting the retail industry, but there are some good things coming out of it. And really what we need to be able to build upon, and going back into this slide, is actually seeing how in the different markets there's gems in there where we can take some hope. So for example, you can see that national sales in Nigeria are still growing, right? It's still in this environment, right? The role of credit, I'm starting to see, and in our data, we're starting to see credit grow at the retail point. So buy now, pay later, those kind of things. And maybe Joy, you can talk to what that dynamic is coming, how that dynamic is coming into the till point.
Okay, I think for us, what we've noticed is that it's giving customers a lot of options, right? In a scenario whereby we are facing economic pressure and there's reducing um, disposable income, you'd see, especially for us during our biggest commercial moments, which is the back to school period, where you have parents with typically 3 children, having to pay school fees, and you also have your monthly bills, and you also have the back to school shopping. Is the customers are beginning to phase their transactions in between 2 to 3 months. One, immediately after school closes, they want to, sort out one child or purchase books and then come for stationery at the end of the second month. So we are seeing customers wanting to phase out how they make their purchases, and solutions like buy now, pay later come in to support such customers. So what we've done and what you've seen is that partnering with financial institutions has enabled consumers to be able to make their purchase first time round. That was initially, that's how it rolled out within physical retail. And now you're seeing these same customers requesting for that service online on our e-commerce platform. So the customers want an omni-channel experience of what they get online is mirrored in store. And back to your earlier point when you talked about brick and mortar retail struggling or dipping due to e-commerce growth. For us, we've seen something very different. Both our channels are growing relatively well. Reason being, some of our products, and you'll see even in terms of consumer behavior, initially you'd start your process or your search for a product online. Say for IT equipment, you'd want to go online and just search for the specs of this item. How does it look like? Then come in store and have a touch and feel. So it depends on how the customer wants to purchase. But one thing is clear, they want to be able to make their decision across both channels.